stream team, you guys are ready? Okay, great. So we are live streaming this. So if you have a question, stop me along the way. And we do have a microphone, so we'll just make sure that we can run the microphone to you so that questions can be picked up. Leslie will be our Vanna White for microphone. So there's just that one switch on there. Okay. So let's begin in prayer, since we are here in the church tonight. And so we pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of grace and glory, you lead us day by day, providing for what we truly need. And we praise you and offer our thanks for your saving power at work in us. In Saint Joseph, spouse of the Virgin and guardian of the Redeemer, you give us an example of faith, courage, and perseverance. Through his intercession, give success to this work of our hands, that our parish may be an ever brighter beacon of faith, worship, and witness in our community. May we open wide the doors of our hearts to Jesus Christ, so that those we meet today, tomorrow, and in the years to come will see in us the fruits of your Holy Spirit and join us on the path of holiness toward your kingdom. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Well, thank you for coming out tonight. For many of you, I know there'll be a lot of information that is certainly, I don't want to say old news, but news that we've shared many times. And so I want to begin simply by thanking you for your interest, for your prayerful support, for your financial support, for your encouragement along the way. Leslie was just on a Zoom meeting this morning with our fundraising consultant who says that we defy the odds, that the success of our financial part of this campaign, we have beaten every prediction, and even with just how much money has come in fulfillment of pledges, defies expectations, and it puts us in a great place. Well, thank you all. Congratulations to everyone. Because it says that even as we have, I have a slide that talks about where we are in terms of finances, but we have most people, or a lot of people, making 3 to 5 year commitments, but a lot of people have fulfilled their pledges early, or are fulfilling them at a pace faster than the 3-year commitment, so that we will have less money to borrow as a short-term bridge loan to cover the gap between when the last construction bill is due, the day they finish, and the time that people's pledges are redeemed, fully a year and a half after that. So it really would take us more than a year beyond construction for the fulfillment of pledges to be able to have everything paid. We have sources of borrowing in the Archdiocese through an interparish loan fund. We'd actually partially be borrowing from ourselves, from our own reserves in that. I can say more about that as we go. So I have some up-to-date information about exactly what the project is going to look like, more graphics, more details as the final building plans came together, and we got more detail than what we had this time a year ago. This is the way the building and design process works. So I have a lot more graphics to show about what the project will look like in its final stage. And then we'll talk a lot about what life will look like here in 2.5 weeks. It's really, it's funny how I'm looking at Holy Week as just this kind of regular week. And it's all eyes. I mean, Holy Week is the biggest week of the year. Normally, I'd be in full-on panic mode about Holy Week. My sights are set 2 weeks later for what happens on April 17th. It's nice that we'll have Holy Week in there to kind of be a nice little prayerful distraction and a great time for celebration. So we know a lot's been happening. Just a week and a half ago was groundbreaking. If you weren't here, there's the famous shot with the shovels. And this actual shot, so this is, if you weren't here, just for perspective, we were right on the other side of this wall. So these two windows, that doesn't work on there, but these two windows are these first two windows. Where we're digging is the line where the new diagonal wall will be, where we cut those corners. We keep referring to these as bump out walls because we're bumping these corners. And those walls, just when I'll point out where it is when we get to it. So just for a show of people here, the project team, as it's evolved, the building committee, the parish building committee, has evolved over the years. Some people have stepped away, other people have stepped up to it. Leslie Masterman, our director of development, really our campaign chair, has been doing an amazing job. We wouldn't be where we are today without Leslie's help. From the building committee, Susan Schmitz is here tonight, who represents the liturgy committee. I'll introduce Edgar Ruano, not listed on the building committee, but the next phase of the project team is how we're going to manage every weekend in the multipurpose room. And Edgar is part of a trifecta team from the parish council who are organizing all of the weekly setup crews for the multipurpose room each weekend. I'll say more about that when we get to that point. Dr. Lynn Trapp, of course, Director of Liturgy and Music. The two newest members of the building committee are Ben Bogdanowitz, who's a project manager with Whiting Turner, and Donald Steiner, who's a retired mechanical engineer and has spent his whole life working in HVAC. Ben and Donald were really helpful as we were getting towards construction documents, and they both spent a lot of time helping us review all of the construction documents. Donald specifically looking at all of the specs for the HVAC system upgrades and improvements. So we've had eyes on that. And then Tyler Tate, our building committee chair, is himself a builder. He's the head of, the president, the CEO of Lewis Construction. Tyler, some of you have probably heard me say it, Tyler has been on the other side of the table on a number of building projects in the Archdiocese. He oversaw, his company did the major restoration of the Basilica back in 2006, huge. Some look at our renderings of our ceiling and say, it looks a lot like the Basilica. I don't know if that's Tyler's influence or not. But at the other end of the spectrum, Tyler also was the contractor for our neighbor a few miles down the road. And interestingly, he and our builder have a great relationship. There was some concern over having a head of a building company and then a project manager for a second building company at helping advise our building company that's another contractor. They're all competitors with each other. But in fact, Tyler and Mark Manafo from CAM Construction, our construction manager, had the opposite relationship when Nativity was building their church. Mark Manafo was the parishioner who was chairing their building committee, and Tyler Tate was the builder. So they've had this great relationship because they've had the opposite role together, so they know what it is to be representing the owner and being the builder on all of these. Tyler also sits on a number of diocesan boards, and that's been helpful because he's been at the other side of the table in diocesan approval processes and things like that. The other members of the project team from the building committee, Matt Dobson, who was chair of the parish council at one point, Jason Roos, who was also chair of the parish council at one point. That's how they both ended up on the building committee. The lead of the design team is John Srigley, a small architecture firm. JRS Architects is just that's his initials, so it's his basic firm. I mentioned CAM Construction, our construction manager. Mark Manafo is the head of that company. He grew up here in St. Joseph Parish. When he came and did his building presentation, he's not a parishioner here now. They live down in Towson. I think they're at Immaculate Conception more often than not. But he talked about when, as a kid, he remembers sitting over here in the front pews as a child and looking all over the place all the time, but speaks with great fondness about this parish and with great reverence about this project. I think so. Yeah, Angelo was I think that, well, Angelo's the son, but I think Angelo was also the father. Our liturgical design consultant, some of you have heard me say this, is a man named David Gardner, Gardner Hall Associates. They do work with Catholic churches, doing liturgical design, renovation, building. He's advised a number of parishes in the Archdiocese of Baltimore on their liturgical features. He had been in the seminary back in the 80s, before my time, but as a seminarian for the Archdiocese of Baltimore, spent a summer here at St. Joseph under Monsignor Cook's tutelage. So he too came into this project already understanding and knowing our parish, having lived here, served here, worshiped here. He also just has great reverence for this community. He did some of our enhancements to the Blessed Mother Chapel a number of years ago when we had to do some repairs in there. And David also did the design of the chapel in the rectory. For those of you who may have seen the rectory chapel, that was David's design. Rounding out all of this is the organ builder, the Paragallo Pipe Organ Company. I'll share some more details. We've not talked a lot about the organ. I'll share some more details about that tonight. And finally, our Archdiocesan project manager from the Archdiocese Office of Facilities Management is a man named Doug Johnson. We're assigned a project manager from the Archdiocese who basically becomes an advisor to the pastor. They help represent us as the owner, but he comes in as an engineer with building experience. He's been with the Archdiocese for more than 20 years, and his full-time job is working with parishes on building projects, renovation projects, all those kinds of things. So he's been our link to the Archdiocese all along, and he's been a great source of support. So here's, this was a picture of the design team last summer. This is Doug Johnson from the Archdiocese, John Spates and Brett Wolfer from CAM Construction. That's John Srigley, our architect. Tyler Tate, our building chair, and there's Leslie. So this is all the old news part. This was all the stuff that we talked about a year ago when we were launching this publicly, about all the needs, how we arrived at this moment from the master planning process that started in 2017 and looking at long-term needs, looking at long-term facilities, as we have a lot of aging buildings on the campus. It's, being the mother church of this area is a great gift and a great privilege, but we have buildings that date back 150 years. So we have things to worry about. The Archdiocese requires us to do a facilities audit every number of years. The last audit was done the year before I arrived. Some of those issues have been addressed. A lot of those issues are things that we're addressing now. It's time for another facilities audit. The school is undergoing theirs now. The church one was going to happen this fall, and we've kind of said, well, do we really need to do the church facility audit now while we're going to be closed for construction? It's obvious we're going to be addressing all of this. The only thing really that we aren't addressing is some exterior things. We did a roof inspection about 4 years ago. We know the roof is in good shape. The walls, the pointing of the stone was all examined a number of years ago. That's all in good shape. So we think this building is actually set with what we're doing for years to come. So this is just a little bit of history. Parish, founded in 1852, first Mass celebrated here really in the 1840s at one of the homes down at the end of the street, where there was a priest who was occasionally coming and serving some of the burgeoning Irish immigrant community out here. But a priest was assigned here in 1852. The church was dedicated in 1860. So when we speak about the age of the church building, we're talking about the center section of the church and the steeple, that structure, the walls of this and just up to here, wherever you can feel the floor is hollow, is the original 1860 structure. Once you get to here, it's concrete slab, and this is the part that was added in 1967. So the essential infrastructure upgrades that are being addressed, and what drove this project from the start, was this long list of needs. HVAC upgrades, and right now we're in that shoulder season where the heat's blaring, but we have windows open, and we can't do much about it. The lighting system, you see the lights pulsate more than they had been. These antiquated light fixtures do not work well with LED light bulbs. We can't get the old-style incandescent light bulbs anymore. The lighting system is in need of upgrade. Sound system has been upgraded as far as we can go. The one thing that's really limiting our sound reproduction, and even we get some of the tunneling and echo sounds at times, because we've got these antiquated analog 1970 speakers in the ceiling that aren't great for reproduction of much of anything other than spoken voice. Great for preaching and proclaiming the word and celebrating the liturgy, terrible for music and just about anything else. So we really wanted to be able to address that as well. We've talked a lot about the expanded restrooms. We will be able to check off that we will meet code. We'll be code compliant for the number of restrooms, the design of the restrooms, complete with water fountains. We've had people for years ask, why don't we have a water fountain? Can't there be some paper cups somewhere? Well, it's a code requirement to have bubblers or water fountains or however you want to call them. There will be water fountains in both side vestibules. Plumbing's still going to be limited back there because there's no plumbing back there for now. We will be enhancing accessibility for persons with disabilities, and we'll be able to say that we will exceed code requirements. In our conversations and design work, we've been meeting with families who deal with disability on a regular basis. We've talked to them about what should we be doing better? What are the things that hinder? What frustrates you about this space? How can we be better at all of this? Even our ramp over in this transept does not currently meet code. It's too steep. We will be addressing that among many other things, power-assisted doors and whatnot. Enhanced fire safety, and enhanced I should put in quotes because we have virtually nothing in here right now. It was a state-of-the-art system in 1970. See that that box right on the top of the wall there? And there's another one back there, and there's ones on either side. That's an infrared beam that is a smoke detector. And if something breaks the beam, it triggers a silent alarm to the fire department. Nothing rings here. Yeah. So sometimes, and if like when decorators are up there, if a ladder passes it, it breaks the beam. It rings to the fire department. We have no idea that the fire department is called until they walk in the door. And it happened a couple of years ago. Somebody blew out the candles instead of snuffing them. Somebody blew them out, and sometimes they smolder. and somehow the trail of smoke traveled up and broke the beam, and 10 minutes later, in comes a cadre of firefighters, air tanks, masks, and all. And we're like, can we help you? And they're like, there's fire alarm. Had no idea. We don't have lit exit signs in here right now. There's no audible alarms. It's a problem. So we will meet code for fire detection, fire suppression, a dry, it's a sprinkler system's going in. I can't remember how they describe it, but we're running extra water line to service a sprinkler system. So we will be fully fire preventative and with all the audible alarm systems and all those kinds of things, and looking at security things as well. So all of this brings the building to code, which is a great thing. And we know, you know this, so here's the existing layout. We're sitting in the space right now. I don't have to describe this at all. And here's the proposed layout. It's not just proposed because this is what it's going to be. A couple of things have been tweaked. This is the same graphic from last year. This is what's been in the brochures, so there's no surprises in here. A number of things have nothing's changed, but there are just a number of things that as we've nuanced and gotten greater detail, this drawing at the time we did this 2 years ago was the most detail we really had. Now it's part of like 150 pages of construction documents that I can't even read most of because there's so much detail. So I think we've discussed this all. Does anybody have any questions about the broad? Sarah Diane. Oh, yes. There we go.
Okay, so my mom would like to know, and I don't have a problem, I'm not insulting the design at all, but with the bump outs, why not go farther to get more space?
A couple of reasons. One, we wanted to respect the integrity of the look of the exterior of the building. You know, the further back we go, the more we destroy the original walls and the lines, and we wanted to maintain the look of the original nave. And if we went back any further, we'd basically be destroying the whole church and we'd be turning it into a big box as opposed to maintaining some integrity of the original 1860 structure. I would say the other reason is cost. The further back we went, the more structurally complicated it became. Because even as it is, where there's going to be, right where the corners are right now, there's a steel beam in the corners, and we have to have a pole here. If we went back further, that was going to get more complicated and exponentially more expensive to be able to maintain that further and further out along this line where there's no structural steel. The side structure is 1960s, and there's a fair amount of structural steel. But going back this way is just built stone on stone. So the further back we go, the more complicated that would get. We will gain about 50 seats, is our current estimate. Yeah, so now you can tell her yes. Okay. So I don't know why this picture keeps drifting down. I've readjusted this in my slideshow. This picture keeps dropping down. This top blue part is not wall. It's just the empty part of the slide because the picture slid down. So this is not anything up here, this blank part. It's just blank slide. So here's the rendering. We've talked a lot about what this all means. And the central design theme is the arch over the central doors. We talked last year publicly about the hope that this original stone, the white part of the stone, all of the stone on the original church is from the local Cockeysville quarry. These two rows, this double arch of this white stone is really what's called Cockeysville marble, the famous Cockeysville marble that's in the Washington Monument in Washington. It's in part of the U.S. Capitol. St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, apparently a lot of marble steps in East Baltimore, and our church. And you know the history of our founding members were primarily the Irish immigrants that were either working the railroad, the North Central Railroad, and primarily working the quarry. There was an article in Baltimore Magazine a few months ago talking about some of the Irish immigrants who were living out here. We got a nice little shout out. The online version of that article actually included some information about our building project. So this central design theme is what is going to be the center of the sanctuary. So even as we're losing this stone wall, which, by the way, is not original, this was the 1967 edition. This is not Cockeysville stone. Tyler Tate, our building chair, loves all this geological stuff. This is Butler stone, so it's further up the road, but it's not native, and if you compared this stone to what's outside, it doesn't match. What we're doing is making the sanctuary symmetrical. So first, the crucifix will move into the center, and then it will be framed by this arch of Cockeysville marble. We have been to the quarry. We've been down here to Martin Marietta, to the quarry. They are very excited about partnering with us and donating the stone. They have been able to find a similar vein. They think it's, we don't really have absolute accuracy, but when they've been here to the church, they've looked at the stone that's out on the front facade. They think they know what veins from the quarry that came from, and they're trying to pull the new stone for this arch from the same vein. And they're donating it for us. So we had a great visit to the quarry a couple months ago. Unfortunately, the day we went, it was completely, the pit was fogged in. They took us out to the viewing platform at the top of the pit, and we couldn't see anything. The background of this slide, this is a close-up of the sample stones they gave us. So this picture here, this is John Srigley, the architect, and I. They drove up a pickup truck with some sample pieces for us to look at to try and determine what the color we wanted was. And we liked this really bright white. It's got some actual flecks of something more marbly in it. But it's going to have a rough hue. It's not going to be highly polished, shiny marble. The quarry here, Martin Marietta Quarry, doesn't cut stone anymore. They just crush it. And they've got all, you can hear, they've got those big crushers that all the stone gets ground up for gravel and hauled off in dump trucks. So we've had to go and find another stone cutter to form the raw stone into the blocks to make the arch. And you've all heard me talk, most of you have probably heard me describe this or read the article in the Catholic Review, that stone cutter, really the only game in town, is the Hillgartner Marble Company. Founded by my fourth great-grandfather, sold by my family in 1972, so there is no conflict of interest. I kind of hoped, I said this the other day, I was kind of hoping, going in, they knew I was coming. I met the owner and, yeah, Monsignor Rick Hillgartner, and we chatted a bit and talked about the family. I think he's the second owner since the family, so it's not like he bought the business from my grandfather's cousin, who was the last owner. I was hoping that, maybe they'd work with us a little bit. And not only is there no worry of a conflict of interest, there doesn't even seem to be much of a favor going on here at all. But it's still a nice little link that there's some history because Hillgartner was founded in the 1840s. It's possible, though not likely. We have to do a lot of digging to find out that was any of the marble work in the original church done by Hillgartner. They do tell me that Hillgartner did source some of its stone from up here in Cockeysville. So it's a nice little coincidental link that will be happening. So Hillgartner will be doing the stone for the arch, and then inside the arch is going to be gold mosaic tile. We weren't sure exactly up until recently whether that was going to hold in the budget, and it is. And so they've got that done. So that's going to be a pretty solid wall in here. That this will be it won't be just flat gold paint, but it'll actually be a series of mosaic tiles. All right, so let's say a couple other design features that we've really honed in on. I wish I had some more artwork to share about the dome. That is, that's kind of a later part of the process. We've always shown the dome as gold with the stained glass oculus with the dove in it. We can tell you that the dove that will be in it will not be that dove because that dove is twice the size that it needs to be for that oculus. It would overtake the whole dome. It's 10 feet wide. It's deceptive. Once we got up there and measured the wingspan, it's huge. We are going to preserve this, and that's going to be, hopefully by summer, that will be in that real high window in the back of the multipurpose room. So our goal is to have it in there while we're worshiping, and that'll be its permanent home. And then the stained glass artisans who are also going to be preserving and helping us reset the windows into the new diagonal walls will be designing and fabricating a new dove, similar in style, probably not identical. I'm hoping to make it a little more proportionate. I know it's all, for some, you remember when it was first put in that it was a little bit heavier than it is, and it looked more like a duck, I'm told, than a dove, and it was already resized a little bit by the artist. So we'll be designing, there will be stained glass window, it will be a dove, and it will be lit from above. We only recently met with an iconographer. It's a young man from Athens who lives here in town, did all the iconography for the Orthodox Church up on Shawan Road, St. Mary Antiochian Orthodox Church, which also has a tie to St. Joseph. When they were first founded, they used the lower hall as their place of worship before they had property and a place to worship. The current pastor and I are friends. His kids are in our school. And so he was very excited when we reached out and said, who did all your iconography, all of the artwork? And we loved what they did up there. It doesn't look overly Byzantine or overly orthodoxy. I hate to say it that way, but there's a look. And it won't look, when we talked to the guy, he was very excited. He came over, visited the church. We showed all the plans. So we're waiting to receive some sketches from him, but we think that's going to be a good fit. We just don't have anything to show about it yet. So just for a reminder, here's what the church looked like. This is an incredibly blurry picture, circa 1945. So the altar rail, the communion rail that you see here, is what's actually up there at the choir loft. In the repainting and everything, the design, that's going to be painted with some decorative painting in some contrasting colors to kind of bring out the artwork and the sculpturing and the carving in there, so that railing won't just be solid stained. It'll have probably some gold leafing, maybe two tones to match the pews the way we're doing them. But just for perspective, where this communion rail is on this picture, probably right about here. And so everything from here back is what got torn down for them to build the new expanded church in '67. Here's another picture, a little bit clearer, taken from the choir loft in the early 1960s. And I'm guessing this was a Sunday Mass. There's another picture that gets used a lot. That's a picture of somebody's wedding. I don't know whose it was. But you can see that the church underwent some repainting and some redecorating, because here there's just kind of a white wall with kind of a painted backdrop to these statues. And I think between 1945 and 1960, the statues were redone, because these statues are rather short, here and here, and by the time you get to this 1960 picture, these are the current statues. So this is the Blessed Mother statue that's over there. This is the St. Joseph statue that's back there, though it's had a treatment to make it look more earth tone to blend in with the stone. And the Sacred Heart of Jesus statue that is back in the vestibule is here, but part of it's blocked in this picture by a fan or something. But it's right here in this corner. But those are the same statues that were here in the early 1960s. We recently uncovered this. So this is a close-up of the altar, as it was at some point, probably more like in this period. This might actually be a close-up of one of those other photos. But you can see the detail of the two-tone marble, both in the altar and then up here in the tabernacle. Keep that in mind for a minute. Here is a color photo of the church in the 1960s. And so all of this red, and you can see here the detail of the ceiling. And let me go back here. Oops. Here you can see the height of the ceiling. Well, look at the tops of the windows in the church. Here's the tops of the windows. So this window here is that, okay? And you can see the ceiling, all of this space up here, and these arches are still partially intact above the ceiling. And that's what we're restoring. In the side sections, it's all having to be built new because those don't exist in the sides, but the space is up there. But to see this in color, when I first saw this recently, I was shocked because I'd never seen a color photo of the church. So this would have been in the 1960s. Here's a better deal. You can see the Joseph statue and really see that it's the same statue. And here's the Sacred Heart that's in the vestibule, the Blessed Mother, as they appear now. But you look at the altar and these insets of marble in a rose or red color, but all of this red trim, this is what the new altar and the pulpit will look like, designed to match what that original altar pre-1967 was going to look like. This will be solid marble. The pulpit will be, the base will be wood painted in a marbleized way to match the altar. The top part of the pulpit will be stone to absorb a lot of the sound of books shuffling and opening and closing. The altar of reservation and the tabernacle, really designed to mimic what this looked like. David Gardner, the liturgical designer, when he asked for all these pictures from the archives, this is how he designed the tabernacle and the altar of reservation to look like. So this is what will be directly below the crucifix. At where the tabernacle is now is what this will be, and the crucifix will be directly above it. This is not reproducing well here if you're not at the right angle. This is what the floor tile will look like. If it looks gray, you're not seeing it at the right angle. If you're looking at it straight on, it's tan. And so this will be the tile pattern in the sanctuary, tan and white checkered. The body of the church will all be just the tan. I mean, it'll still have some patterns in it because it'll be porcelain tile that's treated so that it's non-skid. And then the center aisle will have some decorative tile work in it. And at the front, it's a very traditional thing at the front of the aisle to have some kind of decorative medallion or religious symbol. This is the spot where a casket would park at a funeral, or the couple would stand on their wedding day, or the catechumens would stand during the various rites in the RCIA. And so I wanted something Celtic, but I didn't want it to be obvious. So we didn't go to the base. Somebody said, oh, a Celtic cross. I'm like, yeah, but it's a cruciform church, and if you have the Celtic cross, which way does it face? And if you're constantly looking at the side of it, it'll never look right. So we found this cross that's Celtic, but it's visible from all sides. And it's vague enough that it can also become something that's repeated elsewhere without being in your face. So there are a number of other places where we might feature it in the, I'll come back to one of these other pages again, and I'll point out some of the decorative stenciling around the walls that could incorporate that, though I'd want to make sure that it doesn't get overused. Yes. It would be, yes. So, yeah, the center aisle will probably end about here. So there'll be pews coming further forward. This lower step of the sanctuary that we call like the lower sanctuary, there won't be this lower step. The aisle will just come up, and then there'll be 3 steps up to the main sanctuary. It will be not as deep, but it will be wider. The 3 steps will come all the way over to here, and same on the other side, but it will probably only come out to about here, depth-wise. So the square footage of the actual platform will be about the same. It'll just be not as deep, but it'll be much wider. On this, you can see we're reusing the baptismal font, but we're going to try and soften the look a little bit. So they're going to put some decorative, like a crown mold and marble around the top just to help it match the altar better. And then around the base, it will be clad with marble to match the altar and the pulpit so that they all are of a piece. Some other sanctuary furnishings, the credence table, where the chalices and things are, a much larger table than the tiny little shelf we have over there, good for the altar servers. And then the celebrants, here's one of the places where that Celtic knot cross might be on the back of the new celebrants and deacons' chairs, perhaps. We haven't necessarily settled on that yet. And then here, the Blessed Mother and the Joseph and Sacred Heart shrines. These haven't been done in color yet. He just sketched these in black and white. So this is where we talk about this decorative stenciling that we show all around the church. And if you recall that color picture of the church, it had this red and gold kind of motif and all the ribbing on the ceiling. That gets carried through. So the Blessed Mother altar will get a new facing on the base so that it also ties in with the main sanctuary furnishings, and the Joseph and Sacred Heart statues, which will be on these diagonal walls, will also have similar treatment with the same kind of stencil pattern to frame them. And the paint behind them would probably be a little bit darker than the walls so that the statues kind of are a little bit more visible. On each side or in front of these will also be votive candles. That's been set, that we will have those. Real, because we'll have fire suppression and fire safety. No electric votive candles in any church that I'm in. So we come back to, here's the layout again. I just threw this in so to just to come back. So here's the diagonal walls, and you can see it's not as though we're going to have tons of people sitting in these little diagonal wedges, but between these little bump outs and pushing the sanctuary back and stretching it, we still get the same amount of square footage, but we get a lot more room to connect the sections. And so it's here and here where these Sacred Heart and Joseph statues will be. And just for frame of reference, so see the Station of the Cross over here? The new diagonal wall will start approximately there. So that we're not, it's not huge, but it's significant, that new wall. And these walls are going to reuse the existing stone. So they'll just blend the existing stone. And the hope, and what we're seeing in the kind of the computer renderings of it, is that it will look like it's always, from the outside, they'll look like they've always been there. At one point, the architect was showing like we could do something contrasting, and that's a very hip thing to do with renovations, and he was showing it in stucco and all these other different things and painting the stucco gray. I'm like, no, I want it to blend. I want it to look like it was always there. And so they're going to reuse stone for that. And there's been some question because this wall is 1860 stone. This wall is 1967 stone. Same, 1860, 1967. What they're probably going to do is when they open up these walls, they're going to put all the stone in a pile. All the 1860 stone in one pile and all the 1967 stone in another pile. And instead of mixing them up in half, this wall, the new wall, because at some point the 1860 has to meet the 1967. On this side, because it's the more visible side, all 1860 stone. So the new diagonal wall will be built with all original stone. The one on this side, which is often pretty much obscured by shrubbery and it just doesn't get a lot of visibility, that one, the diagonal wall will be 1967 stone. So the 1860 will meet the 1967 at that spot. On this side, the 1860 will meet the 1967 a third of the way down the transept. So you'll see a lot more 1860 stone as you're coming down Church Lane. Any other design questions? Yeah, the baptismal font will still be relatively in the same place relative to the altar over here on the side. We show it here on this render up 2 steps as it is now. We've actually lowered the font by a step. 1, just to help the sight lines to the altar, and 2, to make it less dangerous when families are surrounding the font. So there'll only be 1 step there, and it gives us a little more room. The second step just made it much smaller. Other questions?
How are you going to accommodate the disabled with the 3 steps in the sanctuary?
Thank you. Good question. It was almost as though you were planted there. There will be a ramp. There'll be a wheelchair ramp down that side aisle on that far wall. There'll be a ramp that will come all the way up to the top of the sanctuary. So all 3 steps, the top step of the sanctuary will be wheelchair accessible. And we show railings here as they are now, or similar. The question of whether we were going to be able to reuse these or not.
With the new altar and the new tabernacle, do we get to keep the relics that are currently in the altar, and what happens to them?
Great question. One is, we don't know, at least I don't know what relics are in the existing altar. I've inquired at the Archdiocese to find out how we would go about finding that out. Somewhere in our history, there must be written somewhere. I've not seen anything. It's not like their names are inscribed in the altar. It would be great if they were. So we will, before deconsecrating this altar, we will remove the relics, and hopefully by removing them, we'll find out what they are. And I'm told that hopefully the Archdiocese archives should have a note of when this new church was consecrated in 1967. There would have been a record of, Cardinal Sheehan consecrated the church on this date, and these are the relics that were deposed in the altar. And we'll find out what they are. Someone recently, and I asked Archbishop Laurie about it, whether we should make a big deal about it. This is, uber Catholic stuff. I was recently entrusted with, believe it or not, a relic of St. Joseph. I have the documentation from the Vatican, from the Congregation for Causes of Saints, that documents it, and it's supposedly from the mantle of Joseph, so from his cloak. Now, I asked Archbishop Laurie, what I thought would be great, my plan was when we put the Joseph statue here, I was going to get it enclosed in something bulletproof and everything proof, but have it on display for veneration. And I asked the Archbishop what he thought. And his eyes rolled into his head enough that the likelihood of the sourcing of this relic that would be 2,000 years old, it's pretty dubious. I mean, all I have is this documentation that's dated from like the mid-1940s. It's not as though it's been traced back hundreds of years or 1,000 years. I'm going to hold on to it. I like the idea. But when I asked the Archbishop about, is this something that we should create on display for veneration of the faithful, he kind of smirked and said, I doubt it. So we're just going to kind of tuck that away. And maybe next year on the Feast of St. Joseph, I will pull it out and get some kind of reliquary to display it in. But we'll have to have the conversation with the Archdiocese about relics for the new altar. So, well, our hope, up until recently, the plan was that we were going to reuse the existing top. That was becoming cost prohibitive because the cost of transporting it, renovating it because of its scale and thickness and just the size of it, it was going to cost us extensively more to reuse it. We are going to hold on to it. We aren't going to jettison it at this point. If there's a chance to use it when we build the Marian shrine using the stone from the wall, that we would also integrate that. If there's a way to do that, we will. But we're not going to just toss it. It won't just get ground up and thrown in a dumpster. Yes, Bob.
Just 3 little questions. Anything being done with the choir loft, the choir room, and how about the sacristy?
Great question. Sacristy will largely remain intact. There has to be some work done when they put the sprinkler system in the building. They have to include the sacristy in order for us to actually get credit for doing the building. So, and I think that light fixture in there that uses those old fluorescent bulbs, that's all going to get replaced. But other than that, the sacristy is just going to get some cosmetic work at this point, unless there's money left for us to put in some new cabinetry. But at this point, we'll restain or repaint the cabinetry and we'll carpet the floor. I really have wanted to have carpeting in there to dampen sound so that it isn't echoey. We will be doing some minor upgrades to the cry room. The windows have to be replaced because the ceiling line is changing. You know, we're not going to have that peaked roof. It's the ceiling, so they have to replace all those windows up there to align with the new ceiling. We can't do much up there without triggering. We can't even call it a designated space other than overflow seating, even though we know what we use it for. But if we showed it with a designated particular unique use as children's chapel, which is what the children's loft, we would have to make it ADA compliant, which means we'd have to put an elevator in. Same with the loft in the back, and that's just not happening. So the loft in the back will remain. It will actually be enlarged because we're moving that glass wall forward to expand the vestibule. So the net result of that is that the choir loft gets made a little bit larger. But that moves us on to the next couple of slides about the organ I'll talk about there. So we'll get a little bit more space upstairs in the loft, and because the ceiling's going up, the loft will feel much more spacious as opposed to feeling like you're, you know, if you're right there on the side, you can kind of touch the ceiling if you're tall enough. But it will gain height back up there, and we'll actually gain some seating up there. Was that just those two? Okay. Peter.
Do something about the floor because when
Absolutely are. Thank you. Boy, we've had great people planted with great questions. So 2 things are happening with that. See, well, you're back far enough you can't see it, but that little cantilever that where it kind of hangs out over, that cantilever is going to go away because the rest of the wall is going to pull out so that we gain a little bit more space for the reconciliation areas and the restrooms that are being expanded. So the wall will actually drop straight down. And they are, even though we can't do much work up there, I've asked them to put more insulation in. We demonstrated it. While the builders and the architects were here, I went up and imitated the kids running back and forth and say, this is what we need to address. And they're like, oh yeah, we can blow some insulation in there and that will dampen it. But the fact that the wall is going to be solid and not having that part that hangs over will help immensely. If you're in the ladies' room, which is directly underneath it, I can't tell you what you might experience, because those where Father Ray's and my reconciliation rooms are right now is what is going to become the ladies' room. The entrance will be in the vestibule, not in the church. That'll just be a solid insulated wall.
Also, as I understand it from what you said earlier, there's not going to be carpeting in the aisles like there is now?
Correct. Partially, you can see how this carpeting has not aged. You know, just all these seams have not been good. This carpet isn't 10 years old, and the age on it and just the wear and tear. Part of what we're trying to do is improve the acoustics for worship. And the thing we want is for the congregation to be able to hear itself pray, so that when the congregation is praying together out loud, there will be a kind of a resonance about that. And raising the ceiling height, creating more hard spaces. The pews will still be cushioned, don't worry. But part of it, maintenance will be easier, and there will be a dignity about the porcelain tile floor. This isn't just going to be your random vinyl tile or tile that we got at Home Depot. This is, you know, commercial grade, church quality. And the original, when we look at some of the original pictures, you can tell there was some kind of tile. Bob.
You mentioned the pews. Have you found a home for the pews?
We're working on that. So when the pews come out, which will happen that first week, they're going to be placed into a series of cargo containers that'll be on the back corner of the property, where they'll be housed temporarily. The pew company is willing to put them on consignment for us, but they don't have a place to store them in the meantime. So we're going to advertise them on consignment for other churches to purchase. We were hoping at one point the possibility of the new parish being built in Glen Burnie, where they're merging 3 parishes and they're going to build a new church at the site of Holy Trinity, and down where Monsignor Slade School is where they're going to build this new church. We were hoping that, because our architect is also their architect, and at one point they said, hey, you know, this is the right number, that's about the size, but their design does not at all fit the shape of these pews. So they are going to talk to them again, because, you know, cheap or free as opposed to new, that there may be some enticement there for them. I would love for them to stay in the Archdiocese, if possible, but we'll see. But the pew company that is doing the new pews is the company that did these, and that's why they're willing to advertise them as available on consignment, that we would get money back for them if they're able to even sell some of them. I mean, essentially, we've got 3 churches worth of pews, and you could get some small churches that need new pews and would easily welcome something like this. So we're going to advertise that for a few months and see what happens, and then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
It's just a minor question, but are the windows going to be reseated like they are now, or are they all going to be?
No, yeah, the side parts of the windows stay exactly where they are. Oh, you mean all the stained glass windows?
No, the windows will stay,
Yeah.
but are they going to be reseated like they are now from the wall, or are they going to be parallel with the flat with the wall?
Flush with the wall or
Oh,
They're like in a little.
oh, they'll be exactly the way they are now.
Oh.
On those new diagonal walls? Is that what you're talking about?
All of them.
All of them. Oh, we're not changing. Most of the walls aren't changing. And most of the windows. So when the stained glass vendor or stained glass artisan comes in a few weeks, they're going to be removing the 4 windows that need to come out where the new walls are being built. They'll take the dove and the whole top triangle out. And then the stained glass window that's in my confessional, which we only kind of remembered a few months ago. Because if you go into my confessional, because it gets direct sunlight most of the day, they ended up putting mini blinds in front of it, so nobody ever sees it, to keep the sun out and the glare out. It's a beautiful window of the Return of the Prodigal Son, and it's a tribute to Monsignor Cook. So that window, it would end up in the handicap compatible stall of the ladies' room. So we're going to relocate that window to the there's a window in the sacristy that's currently just clear glass. So that window of the Return of the Prodigal Son, it's kind of a priesthood window anyway, and it's a tribute to Monsignor Cook. So, and it's the perfect size to fit in the sacristy. So that window will move to the sacristy. It'll be far more visible than it is now in the confessional. But other than that, all the other windows are remaining as they are.
I have another question, I'm sorry. The pews, I noticed, are more traditional style. Are they going to be super close like they are in older churches for shorter people? Or are they going to be modern?
They have to meet code. So yeah, the pews, I mean, the look of them of the two-tone wood, but they'll be modern, they'll have cushions. I can't remember, I don't know if we've actually picked the exact model of like how arched the back is to accommodate more, modern seating. They're not going to be like straight up back like colonial era pews. And the leg room, they have to meet code for leg room. So we think of seat pitch like on airplanes. I don't know if we're going to be saying we're an economy plus for all the seating in the church, but yes.
Thank you. Have you chosen the upholstery for the
We
seating?
have not.
Okay. May I suggest that it not be a solid? Because I know all the wax that is stained some of them. I've seen some beautiful in other churches that are herringbone or tweedy looking. That
We haven't, so the Pew Company made its bid based on what we've drawn and what, we did meet with the Pew Company about a year ago just to look at some different designs, and they knew what design we had looked at. We hadn't gotten that far yet to even look at fabrics or anything like that. Kneelers, like do you put vinyl on or do you do cloth? We'll wait, that'll be stuff that'll evolve over the next few months. Because we also, as much as we show of these drawings with the paint colors, we kind of show a beige on the walls with that red stenciling, with the red and gold stenciling, and the blue and the gold in the coffering of the ceiling. That's the plan. We haven't actually chosen, we haven't sat down with paint chips yet. Now that the paint contractor's been selected and all the subcontractors have been selected, now we're going to be starting to have those conversations. But we'll have to be having the conversations about paint along with, as we get to the final selection of exactly which tile, floor, and what fabric and what color. Are they going to be beige? Are they going to be this maroon? Or what color are they going to be? And those are the details that are still yet to unfold. All right, Ray. Sure, you could try me. I don't know how much I can tell you. So I can tell you a few things. I can't tell you everything. I do know that they're going. The control system is the primary upgraded feature. Is controls. Right now, we're still running off of the 1967 thermostat over there, and it's a pneumatic thermostat. And then if you've ever been in the sacristy and seen the control panel where we turn it on or off, it's occupied or unoccupied, and it's either heat or cool. So all the controls are being updated, fully programmable, adaptable. We'll be able to open dampers and circulate fresh air, which we cannot currently do. The primary heat system is going to be the existing radiators. They said those are in great shape, and it's actually the most efficient way to heat, and so we weren't going to shift to forced air heat. Yes, and I couldn't. We are reusing the existing chiller and the existing boiler. They were both estimated to have about 20 years of life left, and they said no point replacing those yet. You'll have to build into a budget 20 years from now, but they've got good life on them for the next 20 years or so. Yes, all the vents, and they're integrated where I was worried, I said, I just don't want these big round things marring the beautiful coffered ceiling. They're all integrated into the coves, but it'll all be in this, all the air will be in the ceiling. And they're able to reuse a lot of the ductwork that's up there now. I do have another draw. We come back to the color rendering again in a couple slides. So, yes, Bob.
Do you know who's doing the control work?
Bob Ariosa got the bid for the mechanical. I don't know. It was it's a non-proprietary control system. I know that they didn't want some custom design system that nobody would know how to deal with.
Okay, so it wouldn't be like Johnson Control.
It might be a Johnson Control-based system.
Yeah, okay.
I can't remember. They were throwing a bunch of names. This is where it went over my head fast as they were talking. But it was non-proprietary. They were not going to do a custom design. It was either Honeywell or Johnson, and I know that could be anything.
Okay.
But don't quote me. I just know that they were talking, you don't want to go fully customized because then nobody knows how to fix it, and you can't get parts.
Are the controls going to be located here or in another state? Because a lot of buildings and systems are like that. Where
I think it's all here.
It's going to be here.
But it'll be accessible. Like I'll be able to access it remotely, and the people who like our dynastics people could can monitor things remotely. They can do that in other buildings on the campus, but they can't do it in the church. The parish center and the school can be monitored and controlled somewhat remotely, even though everything's here on campus. All right, let me move on because we're almost at an hour. I want to talk a little bit about the organ because we've not said much about the organ other than that we have one. So the Paragallo Pipe Organ Company, founded in 1918, they're based in Paterson, New Jersey, was selected as the organ builder. This is a picture of Dr. Trapp and seminarian Zach and I with the Paragallo family. This is John Paragallo III, his son John Paragallo IV, and their brother Tom, I think it's Tom. So John III is the head of the company today. He's a gifted organist himself. When we went up, they took us to a couple churches in Paterson where they had recently done work, and John sat down at the organ and just started playing. His son, John IV, is a musician, but he's also an architect. So he's the one that does all the drawings and the shop drawings and the CAD drawings that he interacts with the architect and the builder. So this is a company that they build pipe organs. And when you're talking about a pipe organ, you're talking about a musical instrument, but you're talking about an incredibly sophisticated machine. And it's a pipe organ is really one of the oldest mechanical things to ever exist in the world. The earliest pipe organs ran with people pumping billows. They weren't electrical, but it was the series of levers and slots, and you'd pull the draw knobs that would pull a series of rods and things that would control the air flowing into the pipes. And when you think of the engineering of this 500 years ago or 400 years ago, it was pretty sophisticated. A lot of that is now digitally controlled, but it's still, in the basement there'll be a blower room where there's an engine that's producing wind pressure that fills the wind chests, and then when the keys are pressed, a valve opens and air flows through the pipes. So our organ, each rank of pipes is a different sound, a different pitch. So each rank of pipes is a row of pipes corresponding to the 65 or so keys on an organ keyboard. Piano keyboard's 88 keys. Organ keyboard generally is, I think, 65 keys. And so for every different sound, a flute or a trumpet or the more bassy sounds, a tuba or an oboe or a clarinet sound, all these different kinds of sounds, there's a row of pipes or a rank of pipes that has 65 pipes. And there will be more than 2,000 pipes total on our instrument, half of which are restored, are vintage pipes from old organs from churches that have closed. I wish that we were getting all 20 restored ranks from one place, but it appears that that's not what they've, as Paragallo has cultivated or rescued instruments from places that have closed, they restore them, and sometimes they aren't all able to be salvaged or restored if a church had been closed or damaged. But they're vintage instruments from the height of pipe organ builders in the early 20th century. So the fact that half of our instrument will be that kind of vintage sound is pretty amazing. Some of the new ranks of pipes, Paragallo is based in New Jersey, but they actually use a company in Hagerstown that builds some of the parts of the pipes. That is the remnant of the old Moeller Pipe Organ Company that was based in Hagerstown. They closed 25 years ago. But some of the people who worked for Moeller opened their own company that makes organ parts. There will also, in addition to the 39 ranks of pipes, be some digitally sampled stops. So the total tonal family or tonal availability for the organ will be about 80 stops or 80 ranks. Half of it will be pipe, half of it will be digital. And pipe work will be both in the sanctuary on either side of the crucifix and the arch, and some of it will be up in the choir loft. Those pipes that you see up there now are just decorative, kind of giving a hint to when there was a pipe organ back in the old pre-1967 church. That organ was taken out in the early 70s. I'm told it went to the old Polish home down in East Baltimore. I don't know if that is still there, if that organ is still there or working, but right now those pipes just conceal a storage closet. So that will actually become part of the organ with actual voiced pipes up there. And then in addition to what's back there and the main body of the organ, which will be in the sanctuary, there will be mounted above the door over there a small digital, there'll be a couple of speakers that will be concealed behind similar like artificial pipes designed to match the other two. that will basically be speakers to support the choir. So that if there needs to be some added sound so that the choir can better hear, Dr. Trapp can flip a switch and there'll be some sound produced for the choir over there to support them when they're singing. You won't often be able to hear that. The bulk of the instrument will be sounding from there, and most of it will be up here. So the design work is still evolving. The organ builder won't actually start building the parts of our instrument until sometime in the early fall. They need about 6 months at their factory where they build the casework, they build all the wooden parts, they build the console and the keyboards and everything, and they're building and voicing and molding the pipes and making them with all the parts to make the different sounds. And they've been working with the architect and the builder. In the meantime, the electronic organ is going to be moving over to the multipurpose room. So we'll have organ music to support that. Our organ builder, free of charge, is going to be helping relocate the speakers, which are behind the wall, and the current console. That will all be over in the multipurpose room for day one of Mass in the multipurpose room. So the design has really evolved. This picture that we show all the time shows these kind of placeholders. These were just what the architect threw into this graphic because we didn't have any detail work. We had numerous different kinds of renderings. This first sketch by the organ builder wasn't really incorporating what the sanctuary was going to look like, but we kind of said we would want the crucifix in the middle and a place for the tabernacle, so they just kind of did this little sketch of some render of what it would look like with what might be in the back of the church. Originally they were suggesting that the small division of pipes up there would actually be cantilevered over the door off of the railing. We abandoned that design for a number of reasons. One of them was cost. We found out that it was getting very expensive because we were going to have to add all kinds of structural support because this was not lightweight. And there was talk of having to put steel in, and we really didn't want to mess with that back wall. So it was decided to make use of the space that's already there that once already housed an organ, so we know it can fit it and bear the weight. But you do see on this, there's pipes here and in this little box, and then it's kind of hard to see these are pipes that stick out horizontally, and they're what's called like the processional trumpets, where you think of the fanfares for a wedding processional or things like that. We have that rank of trumpet stops, of a trumpet that will stick out like that, will be quite regal. And especially for things like weddings and other solemn occasions. So the design has evolved. This was another sketch they did a few months ago. We weren't real happy with the idea that all of these arches were competing with the main arch, and it was awfully white. So we went back and asked them, well, what if all of the casework was done in the same mahogany that was the dark of the pews and that would be of the dark, all the dark woodwork of the pews, the steps of the sanctuary, other places where dark woodwork would be. So this comes out here in this graphic as kind of red, but it's really meant as the dark wood of the mahogany. So we've asked them to kind of soften these arches to lower them a little bit so that the main arch remains the prominent arch and the dominant arch. But you can see that there'll be some pipes that will be visible in the front. And then the back would be made to look similar to that. But this is still an evolving sketch at this point as the architect and the architect from the organ company are continuing to dialogue with Dr. Trapp and me. So that's just a little bit about the organ. Yes? Oh, so this sketch was done by the organ builder. He was just, this is just a placeholder. It's in our actual renderings, it's the existing crucifix. He just threw that cross in there because he didn't have the graphic of our cross. Gold mosaic tile. This will be basically flat. It won't be an apse. It'll be flat. And the crucifix will be mounted on it. Yep. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so just where yes, Peter. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that cause some acoustical problems? Or is
No,
this
I mean,
done other places?
So we had, early in the process, because we know we're changing the properties of the space, ceiling height, building materials and things, we had an acoustical engineer here about 2 years ago. Before while the construction design, or while the design process was unfolding, he did a whole mapping of the acoustical properties of the existing space. And then he was able to take all of the building design plan, put that into some computer that has done projections of what the acoustical properties will be in the renovated space. But it's not unusual for a pipe organ to be in multiple spots. You think of, even the Cathedral of Mary Queen is an extreme example because of just how long and narrow that is. But the organ is split about 2/3 in the back of the cathedral and 1/3 up behind the sanctuary. And they play together. One organist can play both parts of the instrument. Depending upon where you're sitting in the cathedral, because it's so extreme, you might hear one before you hear the other. In a space like ours, it's not a concern. And the technology, I asked them a question about, well, because the pipes will react to temperature, seasons, humidity, and the organ has to be tuned every once in a while. They come in like tuning a piano. And I asked, well, what about the digital stops? Because the digital doesn't change because it's electronic. The technology of this kind of instrument, the digital stops are listening to the pipes and automatically adjusting the intonation to be in tune. So like in the fall, when the humidity drops and the temperatures drop, if the organ kind of in general goes a little flat, the digital pipes will automatically adjust accordingly so that it will play in tune. I was flabbergasted. I don't even want to know how they do that. The fact that they can just amazes me. But it's not unusual for a pipe organ to be divided among different spots. And there's some of it can be done for effect, where you can play. There are different kinds of classical pieces in the organ repertoire that you'd play where you'd alternate between one side and another, and you'd hear different sounds coming from different spots for effect. At other times, it's really just what's in the back is really helping support the congregation more, so that you're not hearing everything coming at you, but you're hearing it supporting from behind. All right, so let's talk about costs, and then we'll get into the final process piece and what happens over the next 10 months. When we announced the campaign, we talked about $6.5 million as the price estimate. I shared a number of times that that was all calculated before the pandemic, and we had some things that came out of the design, so we just left the $6.5 million as a placeholder. We actually ended up doing pretty well relative to inflation. There was great concern when we brought the builder on, as we got more detail and as the market conditions were changing last year. We were really concerned we were hearing about other projects that were exponentially increasing. Church of the Resurrection in Ellicott City saw its $14 million project go to $18 million. And I knew that was happening, and I was really holding my breath. So when Camp Construction came on board as the construction manager, they did an updated estimate that brought us in at $7.1 million. All things considered, it wasn't too bad. At one point in the fall, they did another estimate, and we were getting towards like 7.3. We didn't really share that one because they kept saying, this is evolving, and we are seeing some things improve. So when we finally got, excuse me, to the final cost in the last 3 weeks, as we got to the final bids from subcontractors, the price has come down to $6.9 million. There are still $500,000 in contingencies and another several $100,000 in allowances that will, hopefully, half of them will not come to be. So the hope is that the 6.9 will come down to 6.7 when all is said and done. We've got almost $500,000 in contingencies, which if you watch HGTV, those are the things like when the builder comes in and says, we have a problem, we found, we found termites, or we found mold, or hey, this is a load-bearing wall and we now need to put steel in, or something like that. So $500,000 in contingencies for a project of this size is to be expected, but the hope is that we won't use all those. And so if we use half of those, we get this number down from 6.9 to 6.7. There's another couple $100,000 in allowances for things that we haven't actually set yet. One example that I'm loving to give right now is the light fixtures. When we were doing some of the design work 2 years ago, we're like, oh yeah, do we want decorative light fixtures or chandeliers or pendants or something? I'm like, yes, we do. We looked at the drawings without it, and it looked unfinished. I said, I want something decorative. They're less functional now than decorative. Most of the functional lights will be recessed lights of different kinds. And the lighting effects are going to be really dramatic. With those arches, what we're calling the coves, these arched walls are going to have some accented lights to draw attention to them. You might come in at a different time in the evening and see just those lights on, and we're hoping some really beautiful, ethereal kinds of effects for nighttime things or different kinds of services during Holy Week. So anyway, we were looking at different kinds of chandeliers, and the design people and the architect were saying, well, what are you thinking about? At one point, we were possibly going to be inheriting the light fixtures from the seminary chapel at St. Mary's Seminary because they were replacing their light fixtures. And I went to St. Mary's Seminary. They were beautiful. Well, when they took them down, they had them in storage. I went to see them. They had the exact number that we needed. I went to see them, and up close, they looked nothing like what they looked at 30 feet up. And in a chapel that was as tall as St. Mary's Seminary, where they hung 30 feet in the air, you could get away with the fact that they looked like they were spray-painted steel. When I saw them up close, I'm like, these are not going to work in our church. So I'm like, thank you, but no. So we started looking around. We looked at a couple of online catalogs from vendors of commercial lighting fixtures that specialized in churches. You know, they have all these different specialties. And a couple of them had lines specifically for worship spaces. And so I said, I'm thinking of something like this. And I just pointed to a couple of different things without at all knowing what they cost. So we see some of the price estimates, and I'm like, why is the lighting bill so high? And they're like, oh, well, you picked these fixtures that cost $8,000 each. Turns out what I picked had alabaster globes. I've been told that I have expensive taste, but so there's right now in the budget an allowance for those fixtures, which I'm like, we are not spending $8,000 a fixture. Now, we've already actually been able to source the same fixtures a little bit cheaper, but we're probably going to go in a little bit different direction. But the budget still shows the placeholder for those fixtures. So there's another $50,000 that's likely going to come off. What's that? Wait, I'll start watching Overstock.com and see if they end up on there. So anyway, so this 6.9 is really the guaranteed maximum price, and the Archdiocesan project manager has basically challenged them to get that number back to 6.5. So we've got a lot of cushions in there, and barring all those HGTV dramas, we feel pretty good that this number is going to come down at least to 6.7. So progress, here's where we know we are. Pledges and gifts, 6.5. So we've really got this like $200,000-300,000 to go, depending upon how we want to play with that final number. And the largest single gift, I am so proud of this community because we're at 6.5. Now that 6.5 includes $1 million from our parish endowment and our own reserves. So we've raised 5.5. And the largest single gift, I don't mean this lightly, is only $500,000. So we've had one generous family that ponied up that much. But what this says to me is that the parish, the breadth of the parish, has supported this project. Our success is not from one person. I mean, it would be great if somebody could come in and just write the check to cover those last few $100,000. But the fact that people have broadly, I'm not making eye contact with anybody, the fact that we have reached what we've reached without some big landmark multi-million-dollar gift says something about the commitment of this community and the way that this path forward has moved so well. So here's what everybody wants to know now. In the last 10 minutes, let's talk about what life will look like around here. So final construction documents were completed in December. We went through the approval process of the Archdiocesan Building Commission. That meeting was where they wanted to talk about that the Building Commission is made up of a number of, it's all volunteers, people who represent the building trades in different facets, who are involved at the Archdiocese, have worked on different projects. So the architect was there, I was there, and then the Building Commission members. They were all asking questions about, oh, well, what are you doing with where you do these couple of new pieces of roof? What are you doing for roofing material? And what are you doing about this? And they were talking about HVAC, and they were talking about controls, all kinds of stuff that I just sat back and listened because I really don't know those things. We had a separate meeting with Archbishop Laurie, who wanted to hear all about the sanctuary design. And that was the meeting where I was able to participate a little bit more actively. Both of those approvals happened in December and January. Subcontractor biddings took place in the month of February. That's how we've arrived at this final price, as we have all the subcontractors with their actual bids for their work. A building permit was issued on February 28th after Baltimore County did an on-site visit to check about some hazardous material questions. We think we're pretty free and clear of any issues of hazardous materials. They've done some testing in the walls. They did some testing with materials up inside the ceiling with insulation and some tiling that's up there. We think that asbestos is not an issue, which is rather remarkable given the 1967 vintage of the current state of things. So we are cleared to proceed with the building permit. So the construction timeline, final Mass in church is here on Sunday, April 16th. The actual final liturgical act will be the Divine Mercy devotions on that Sunday afternoon. So contractors are scheduled to be here that Monday morning. Daily Masses, Monday, April 17th, begin in Joe's Cafe, which will be renamed the chapel for the year. We will not be calling it Joe's Cafe. It will not function as anything but a as a place of prayer and devotion. So we'll have temporary signage with some vinyl banners all over the place, pointing to things and leading people to various spots. But that space will be referred to as the chapel. Contractors will be on site. They will have fencing up to cordon off the church by midweek of that week. That first day, April 17th, volunteer call, because the first thing we're doing Monday morning after the 8:30 Mass over in the chapel is we'll be back over here packing everything. So those first couple of hours, anybody who wants to be here to help pack up hymnals, books, packing up things from the sacristy, packing up things from every storage space, taking things off the walls. A lot of things will be packed away. We have a storage, one of those, what do you call those? Pods. We have a large 20-foot pod coming. I think it's coming next week. That's going to be housing a lot of things. Some things will be going over to the school. Some things will be going into the parish center. Some of the valuable, fragile things will be going to the rectory for safer keeping. We have to watch what we put into the pod. And a lot of things we need to send to the chapel, to the lower hall, and to the multipurpose room for use on weekdays and weekends. But that first day is going to be kind of a blitzing of, in the morning hours, kind of all kinds of, whatever you can do. If you can pick up hymnals and books and things, by afternoon we'll be looking for some more targeted volunteers to help with some more heavy lifting, furniture items and things like that. The builders will also be walking around that day, starting to do some staging, setting up their construction office, which will probably be in the vestibule. They won't be doing any hard work for a couple days. They're estimating by Tuesday afternoon they'll start removing pews. By Thursday, the first demolition crews are here to start working on, well, the stained glass people will be in probably that first week, carefully removing the glass that has to be removed. But they'll start work on the ceiling demolition, all the pulling out electrical fixtures. The plumbing will be shut off by the end of the week. Things are going to move fast, and they've already got people scheduled to be here. I'm excited about the fact that, yes, we're not going to be there on April 17th saying, oh gosh, we don't have, we have a building permit so we can start. They've got people, subcontractors are scheduled and ready to go. It's in these first months, it's all about labor, I think. We don't have to worry about supply chain for building materials yet because we're not there. Gene. Every weekend. That's Edgar's team that I mentioned in passing. So the plan is that during the week, the multipurpose room belongs to the school. And we want to make the multipurpose, because we don't have access to Joe's Cafe, we want to make sure that the multipurpose room is available for regular parish life as much as possible. So the plan is that every Saturday at noon, there will be a team of volunteers. There's going to be a sign-up genius going live on the website in a couple of weeks. Edgar and his team already have the first couple of weeks covered, I think. Once we get to the end of June, the multipurpose room will stay set up for the rest of the summer, so we won't have to deal with that. We have to get through Vacation Bible School the last week of June. Once that's done, the multipurpose room will stay set up. It will not be usable for anything else. It will stay set up for Mass so that we won't have to deal with volunteer crews for the summer until September. And then the sign-up genius will keep going. So that's going to be one challenge for us, but we're hoping that people will step up. And we've already had some groups, like the Scouts have committed to a week or two. The Hispanic community's offered some. We're hoping some small groups, maybe like have youth ministry, take an occasional weekend. Some families might say, hey, get 3 families together, get your small group together, and offer a Saturday to set up chairs and things like that. So that's the hope, is we'll all be in this together. Yes, so this pulpit, this tabernacle, and this chair will go over there. The daily mass pulpit and the daily mass presider's chair will go to the cafe, or to the chapel. So we've got enough sanctuary furnishings, and we won't be moving them from week to week. Those will basically stay set up on the stage. They're saying substantial completion of work is late January, and the building will be turned over to us, God willing, the first week of March. That gives us a 2.5-week contingency to get to Holy Week. Sunday, March 24th is Palm Sunday, so that's kind of the fail-safe day. The organ installation will be the one thing that is delayed. They really can't start the substantial work on the organ until after everything else is done, because the organ, they'll have to be, after we're in the church, there will be days where after morning mass the church will close so that they can be in here doing voicing and tuning where they need uninterrupted quiet, and they can't be working around other contractors. They can't be installing the organ while other dusty, dirty construction is going on. It has to be a clean room for that. So typically for something like this, the organ will come later, and there will be a separate celebration of the organ's dedication, probably in late May or early June of 24. So the dedication of the new church would take place in March. So we would dedicate the church. We'll have a piano, and actually at this point it's looking like we're going to have a new piano as well, because this piano, as well as it's served, has really taken a beating, and it's not holding tune as well, and a donor has stepped up to help fund a purchase of a new piano. Dr. Trapp's already been talking to the local Steinway rep about the possibility of a used Steinway, so we might be getting an instrument that's a substantial bump in quality and size. We'd be looking for an instrument that's a piano that's a little bit larger than the one we have now. This one will stay on campus. I think the plan at this point is that piano is going to go over to the chapel, so that we'll have, like when we're doing adoration and benediction, we'll have a keyboard down there for things, so that we can have music down there when we need it. And so this will remain on campus and remain in service. So I've talked about weekend masses, Joe's, daily masses, devotions, and prayer. And the nice thing, one of the nice little benefits of this time is because the lower hall will be designated and set as a chapel, it gives us a place for private prayer even on weekends. So you can come to Mass in multipurpose room, and then after Mass, have some quiet time, which we don't have now. We don't have the luxury of a place for quiet prayer after Mass, because it's kind of chaotic in here, and that's part of what it is to gather as community. People visit, make their way outside, but it's not conducive to private prayer between Masses. There'll be a place to go and pray privately all throughout Sunday morning, and it will have the same opening hours as the parish center and the church typically now. So that's where adoration would be, Divine Mercy on Wednesday afternoons. All those things that happen as devotion will happen over there. Funerals, most of you have heard by now, we will be doing at St. Francis Xavier, Hunt Valley. We'll take our entire funeral ministry up there. So our sacristan, our hospitality, our music ministry, presiders, even our vestments are going to go up to Hunt Valley. And they've graciously agreed to host us up there. So we actually have our first memorial mass that was just scheduled yesterday for sometime in late May. The person passed away a while ago, but they wanted to have a memorial mass, and it's the first one that we've worked with them. And so our staff has already been up there. Our office staff and their office staff have a communications link. Dr. Trapp was issued keys, so they are graciously accommodating that. Weddings, we're taking on a case-by-case basis. I have a couple of weddings scheduled. One is Ruth Morris's daughter. So I have a couple of weddings scheduled at Immaculate Conception in Towson. They've graciously agreed to accommodate us. We're quickly getting to the point that I think we're almost past the point of, I think soon, any weddings that surface by now are probably already be looking at late winter or next spring. So we're probably getting close to starting to schedule weddings back in here after Easter of next year, because people are usually typically planning those that far out. Other than that, parish life, we're doing our best to try and maintain everything else: faith formation, social activities, other parish events, small groups, educational opportunities. Coffee and donuts will be in the main level of the parish center, weather permitting, out on the porch. That you'll go inside to in room 3, the main area of the parish center, main floor, and then you can kind of just mill outside for coffee and donuts. So that's going to be maintained. We didn't want to lose that altogether. And then, so that's about the extent of that, and I went a lot longer than I really hoped to. So other comments or questions? Kathy?
Having spent 29 years of my life over there, is it going to impact the school? I mean,
Great question.
We built the multi-purpose room in that building, and school never closed. The children developed a relationship with the person who was in charge of construction. They journaled what was going on because they had a blast, and we never closed. But will this impact like carpool duty?
It will not. So the builders, when they got the bid and came on board, as they were starting to plan for the construction process, they actually came here a couple of days and watched and monitored morning carpool drop-off and afternoon pickup. They have their daily construction schedule set so that all of their crew is arriving before drop-off, and they will finish their workday after 3 o'clock. They know that deliveries cannot happen until after 9 a.m., and they have to be concluded before 2:30 so that no driveways or thoroughfares are impeded at all. By and large, no driveways will be closed. The church, the area around the church will be fenced off. But they also know that there will be no impact, that the school, the front circle and main entrance to the school will be still accessible. Now, I should say on weekends, we've designated, and we are going to have the parking lot restriped and repainted, and we will have new handicap parking designated. Yeah, when we were walking around saying we need to identify handicap spaces, I'm like, we really need to restripe the entire lot. You can hardly see anything. So we will be doing, I think we've already talked to your brother, Roni, and he's going to be, Edgar's brother, Roni, has a paint company. And they're going to be restriping and designated the first 2 rows or parts of the first 2 rows on that side of the parish center as the handicap parking for Sunday Mass. There's 2 little handicap spots right down here by this little circle. Those are going to be cordoned off because that's going to be the main pedestrian thoroughfare into the school. And we don't want anybody trying to navigate that narrow driveway and that tight little circle while you've got everybody coming in and out that one entrance of pedestrian traffic. So if people need to be dropped off, they'll just drop off right at the entrance to the driveway and then pull into the parking lot. We'll have, I think we've designated 16 handicap spots in the first 2 rows over there for both Sundays and weekdays for Mass in the chapel. But we will be restriping the parking lots in the middle of all of this. But the builders also know that they can't really cross the firewall to the school. The Archdiocese has been pretty clear because the construction crews won't be vetted for interaction with the school community. But there's no need for them to enter the school building at all, so they know they won't be able to cross over there.
Where will the choir be seated? And where will Dr. Trapp? Afterwards, yes.
In the same general vicinity, but that area is going to be a flexible seating area. There are going to be wooden chairs that will be made to match the pews. They will come from the same place that's making the pews, but they'll be movable and arrangeable in various scenarios, and they'll have kneelers on them. But the choir area will basically be that same area. Because there'll be individual chairs, they'll be able to be angled so that the choir is kind of facing the congregation a little bit more for sound to travel. But it also means that the seats in that area are flexible so that if there's just a couple of rows of musicians, a smaller ensemble, or more instruments, they can push some chairs out of the way to make room for more instruments. And then the rest of the seating would be open seating, and there would be one of these privacy or modesty rails that would be movable to designate what is music area and what is open seating. The other nice thing is those, because that will be flexible seating, for the daily rosary, people can take the last rows of chairs and turn them around to face the Mary altar, to pray the rosary actually facing the Mary shrine. So that whole area will be flexible seating. And Holy Thursday Eucharistic Adoration there.
What about Dr. Trout? Where is he going to be?
No, the organ console will be about where it is now, and the piano. The organ console will be movable, but yeah, the organ console will be there.
My first question is, will we be able to access the cemetery with everything
Yes.
blocked off?
Yes, that driveway will still be open. I mean, there might be a time you pull up and they're
Right,
unloading
for sure.
something.
But we can still go to the grave sites?
Yes.
Okay.
Cemetery will still be active.
And then Katrina Castro wants to know, I have
She online?
There's several people online texting
Oh.
questions.
Oh, great. Okay, go. Oh, wonderful.
She wants to know, with the lector ambo being over by the music side, will the cantor and come up for the psalm?
Yes.
Okay.
That's part of why we're switching is in most churches, that's the side where the pulpit is. But it also does make it easier so that the cantor can more easily come up to lead the psalm from the ambo because it's part of the scripture readings.
Yeah.
There'll still be we have new cantor stand being made, and that'll be closer to the music area.
Okay. Those
Great.
were my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Well, yes. No, the base of the altar is going to be marble. The altar will be solid marble. The other furnishings will be partially wood painted to look like marble. That's partially cost. And sourcing that much marble was.
There was wood coming from Germany?
Yes, so some of the woodwork, so the wood pieces, the ambo, the altar of reservation where the tabernacle is, that will be wood painted to look like marble. A new processional cross and the stations of the cross are all coming from Oberammergau, Germany. And it's one of the woodworkers that's been in Oberammergau since the Passion Play started. Their great, however many grandfather was one of the original Passion Play cast members back in 1650 or whatever that first Passion Play was. Yes, the head of that company was in Baltimore last November. I met him. It was suggested that I stop at their studio when I was there last year in Oberammergau. He came to Baltimore last November when the U.S. bishops were meeting to exhibit for the bishops' meeting. And we knew he was coming, and so we brought him out here one day. And he took pictures in the church. He took pictures of the crucifix. They're designing the new stations of the cross around our Jesus. At one point, so the corpus or the body of Jesus is going to be taken off the cross to be restored and restained. Originally, the plan was it was going to be done in Oberammergau. I was kind of flabbergasted of how we were going to get, like the cost of shipping. I had this image that I was going to buy Jesus a business class ticket and prop him into a lie-flat business class pod on Lufthansa while I sat in the back. Yeah. It's actually, that was becoming a little bit logistically complicated. So David Gardner has a local woodworker that he works with who will be doing the restoration and the kind of the refinishing of the body. But the actual cross is going to remain. We'll use the existing cross. But that they're sculpting the stations so that the face of Jesus matches, as well as the new processional cross will all be of a piece. All right. I had an original idea of using the wood as planking for the sanctuary floor. Well, so we found out a couple things. One is there's some spots where the finish is worn off, and there's some concern that there might actually be some mold up there. Not quite sure. I don't really want to know that. But it's also pine, which is very soft, and it's very thin because it's for sealing, so there's not a lot of weight up there. So we were told that it isn't really good for much of anything. And the cost to remove it, to try and reuse it or give it away or sell it, was going to be cost prohibitive because they were going to have to carefully remove every plank and take all the nails out. It would have escalated the demolition expense a lot. And we were basically told, you can't reuse it in any other way in the building because it's not made for walls or anything like that. It's because it's very porous and very thin. So we're not, it's just being ripped out. I mean, if somebody wants to be there and climb through the dumpster and grab it and watch the nails, good luck. But in order for them to pull it out and have it available for something, they were going to have to painstakingly remove all the nails for safety, and that just was going to be cost prohibitive. We're trying to reuse what we can. What we can't reuse but is reusable, we will make sure gets donated, or like the pews, we're going to hope to sell them and recoup some money. The few things that we're not reusing, like the Stations of the Cross, will get donated. There are repositories of sacred art that are available. I get emails from this one place in Pennsylvania when they get, hey, we just got a statue of such and such, and it came from somewhere, and here it is, and we're selling it for this much, or you can have it for the cost of restoring it or cost of transport. So there are churches that repurpose stuff. We've actually looked at some of those kinds of things. We were looking recently at possibly getting some Stations of the Cross from another church. We want to get larger stations that are just a little bit bigger than the ones we have now. So we have a plan for having new ones done from Oberammergau, but we also recently stumbled upon a set that might be close to what we're looking for a fraction of the cost. So there'd be another allowance that we get some money back. We saw some pictures. We haven't seen them in person. When we looked at the pictures in detail, somebody was noticing that it looks like a lot of the wood is split, and what are we going to have to pay to have them restored? And then we're right back where we started, and with not what we necessarily wanted. So we're always looking at that kind of stuff, and if we have things, we're not just going to jettison things. A lot of what's being done is they're reusing lots. All of the doors, a lot of the fixtures are all being restored and reused. They're doing everything they can to reuse and keep what we have as part of our patrimony. The bell tower, the question for some people here online, the question is about anything changing in the bell tower. Once in a while I have people ask me, like, well, what if we had a mechanical action on the bell? I like the rope. I like it the way it is. Well, yeah, the rope might need to, yeah. But to change it to something that's automatically on a timer, I like the fact that somebody has to pull on it and swing it manually. Some have asked, like, could we get more, it's a possibility that we could get more bells and have like a whole 5-bell thing that we could chime the hours and all that kind of stuff. We've not explored that at all. I have no idea about how much room there is up there for more bells. Somebody told me this when we met with Baltimore County. They told us that they think our bell was originally a sentinel bell from the Baltimore City Fire Department. When the guy from the building office we showed pictures of the original church, and he said, what year was this built? And we told him 1860. He said, chances are your bell came from the city fire department because it was in the 1850s that they were upgrading all those old manual warning bells with the earliest sirens. And what they did was they sold or gave away bells to churches. And they said, your church was built at the right time. And he said, chances are, if you've ever gone up, I've never gone up there, but if I want to make sure while construction's going on and while we've got ladders and everything, I want to make sure we get a picture of the bell, because they said if it is one, it would have the Baltimore City Fire logo on it. And that would be just another little interesting story to tell if that is in fact one of those bells. Yeah, I mean, it just adds to the stories and adds to the history. So, well, everybody, thank you. It's 8:30, so it's past 8:30. So thank you for coming out tonight. I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for those who've joined us online, or those who will end up watching this later, because this presentation will be archived on the website for people to watch later. So thanks, everybody, and have a great night. Hopefully we can still see the lineup of planets that was supposed to be visible from like 7:30 on. They said look west, and tonight's supposed to be that 9 or 5 planets lined up tonight.